So today I'm adding a little bit on to the organelle unit. I had done lesson 1A, B, and C, and it stopped and completed a review then. And then I was thinking about it, and I had said that we would go over further the organelles that were involved in the cellular respiration and photosynthesis when we did a section on energy. And I've changed my mind and decided that we probably need to do a foundation first. I really am concerned about how little you might have learned about cellular respiration and photosynthesis on remote learning. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes going over the organelles that would be important as far as cellular respiration and photosynthesis and adding them to your little organelle test. So where I changed my mind and I said 10 organelles, and make sure you focus in on what the AP College Board wants you to know as far as organelles. These 6 are also ones that the AP College Board would want you to know, focusing in on cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So instead of having just 10, I think I'm going to move that up to 16 organelles. So the first 3 here have to do with photosynthesis, and here I've drawn one single chloroplast, and you would find those chloroplasts in the leaves of the tree or the plant. And so to go over just one of these chloroplasts, they are stacks, and they're like cookies, or mint chocolate chip cookies would be one way of looking at it, or poker chips, something like that. And each one of these is called a thylakoid. And the thylakoid are organized stacks, and that is where our photosystem 2 is going to take place. So if you remember a brief overview of photosynthesis, remember that water comes into the leaves from the roots of the tree, and that once sunlight hits these stacks, the electrons in here start bouncing around. Remember that water is split and we have oxygen given off, and the hydrogens are bouncing around. So for the organelle component of this class, you need to know that the thylakoids are stacks inside a chloroplast, and that is where the photosynthesis takes place. Your photosystem 2 and 1. The granula are the entire stack. So here would be 1, here would be a second, there'd be a 3rd, 4th, 5th around that. So thylakoids are the individual poker chips or the cookies, and the stack is the granula. Then the fluid around that, and that is where you are going to have the carbon fixation. So remember that what we breathe out, the carbon dioxide that we breathe out or other animals breathe out, end up being taken in by that plant and used along with the other material, that the electrons from the stacks here. And that is what is going to end up making the energy for the plant. So that carbon fixation happens within the stroma. And also, this is where you're going to get the ATP as well. Then we look at cytosol, mitochondrial matrix, and mitochondrial inner membrane. So where these 3 have to do with the plant, these 3 have to do with an animal cell. So remember, these are both eukaryotic cells. Plant and animals both are eukaryotic. So if we take a look at, this is one mitochondria, and depending on where it is in the human body, there may be many, many mitochondria. For example, in cardiac tissue or your leg muscle tissue, there'd be an awful lot of mitochondria because they need to make energy very quickly. So if we look at the components of that, we have the plasma membrane of a mitochondria, and then inside of that, we have these inner membranes, and they're very thick. And inside of that inner membrane, the space is called the matrix. So if we go back a very short review of cellular respiration, it is happening, the first part of that is happening outside of the mitochondria. And AP College Board loves to ask location. They often will ask a very short question or a content question. It has to do with location, 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 just like a real estate agent. So in this case, the first part of getting your energy happens outside of the mitochondria. And here I've written down the formula for glucose. So if I had one glucose molecule, that ends up getting broken down in the cytosol, or the fluid around inside the cell, outside the mitochondria. And it will get broken down into pyruvate. And it actually will get broken down into 2 pyruvates. But one at a time, a pyruvate would enter into the mitochondria into and flow into the matrix, or this middle portion in here. And the mitochondrial matrix is where the Krebs cycle itself occurs. And remember that outside here, there would be 2 ATPs made. So it's, again, one of those trick questions that often pops up in one of the tests. Where is ATP made? Well, ATP made is it's made in 3 different locations. 2 outside of the mitochondria and the cytosol. And then very few, again, only around 2 inside the matrix. Almost all of the mitochondria, the 28 odd or so, is produced in the inner membrane, or what I highlighted here in this pinkish color, of the mitochondria. So that is where the electron transport system happens. Excuse me. So again, as far as just one mitochondria is concerned, we have the mitochondria, we have the regular plasma membrane that we'll talk about in great detail in just a few more classes. The pyruvate, one at a time, would enter in and go into the matrix of the mitochondria. And that is where the official Krebs cycle happens. And in that, we would have electrons removed, and those electrons that are removed from that Krebs cycle end up going into the inner membrane for the electron transport system. And the ETS, or the electron transport system, is where almost all of the ATPs are created. So as a quick review again of these 6 organelles that are specific for making energy for cellular respiration and photosynthesis. The first 3 for photosynthesis, here is 1 chloroplast. It would be located in the leaf. We would have water coming in from the roots, and we would have CO2, carbon dioxide, coming in. And in the first step, that water is split, and it gives off oxygen. But that happens in these cycloid stacks, and these are attached to one another. And the entire stack is called a granule. And the fluid around that, where the ATP is actually going to be generated, is called the stroma. Where for the animal cell, the fluid around the mitochondria is the cytosol, or cytoplasm. And that is where the first step happens. And that is where a sugar molecule would be broken down into 2 pyruvates. The pyruvate would enter one at a time into the matrix of the mitochondria, and the matrix is where the Krebs cycle itself happens. And very few ATPs are created during that Krebs cycle, usually generally around 2. And then the electrons that are being pulled off from that Krebs cycle flow into the inner membrane of the mitochondria, and that electron transport system is where that happens, and that generates almost all of the ATPs. So these 6 end up being very important organelles as far as the cellular respiration and photosynthesis. And those I'm adding into our organelle review. Thank you.